Hi, welcome to White Paint and Pastels. I'm Yvonne. So a little while ago I walked in the other room and Kelly was changing out the bearings and wheels on a skateboard, and there on the table was a pile, a jumble of all the old bearings. And the colors, the formations, the lights, all of it was intriguing to me. So I wanted to do a painting. Getting ready to do a new painting, and we're going to start out with doing a few thumbnails and making final decision on composition. Okay. I think this is enough. I was going to do 2 thumbnails and then a larger one. Enough. I think I've learned what I want to learn. So I wanted to show you the bearings. So if we spin it on this axis here, it's going to foreshorten and make the sides smaller. If we put the axis here and spin it, it's going to be shorter from top to bottom. So we're going to get our drawing started, and we know we're going to make all of our bearing discs 6 inches. Draw them based on the axis. So we're not going to draw a 6-inch circle for each bearing. We're going to identify the axis points for each bearing. That's the key to doing this. So last night I had to fill in some of the bearings to get an idea of the composition. I kept getting lost by looking at all the circles. So I did that, but then I realized I have to figure out really what size the inner circles are. We have taken a bearing and increased this bearing, which is about 7/8 of an inch, into a 6-inch bearing. So now what is the actual interior circle, which equates to about a little less than 2 inches. So we need to have some uniformity and really true relative proportion going on. Because I've miscalculated the depth of the bearings, this is very close to the center of the bearings. So the measurement between one side and the other side is very close to the actual diameter of the interior circle. And one of the other things I changed was the depth of all the sides of the cylinders. I had them at varying depths because it actually, in fact, changes. But when you translate that onto paper, it made it look like they were all different bearings. That I had some really skinny bearings and some fat bearings. It did not translate visually the right way. We'll go forward from here and I'll finish this last section and make these final corrections so we can get down to painting the picture. I'm so happy the drawing's done and we're moving forward. Trying to correct those last angles on the sides of the bearings was very challenging, but I'm pretty satisfied. And we have a new gesso brush. The older brush that I had gotten from Lowe's was okay, but it kept leaving hairs. So let's hope this new one from Blix works much better. We are using clear gesso by Liquitex to give texture to the paper. So we're finding out if this is going to work together. I have never done this before, done my drawing on the paper and then added the clear gesso. Now it just has to dry. We've got it all covered. Okay, so I've definitely decided to take the tape off very carefully to help it dry flat, and then we'll retape it when we start our pastel work. Yeah. All right. We are getting ready for the next phase, and in order to start with that, we need to put away all our drawing materials and get out our pastels. first time ever of using the Terry Ludwig, so this is going to be a fun time, right? So we have Terry Ludwig, Conte Paris from the 60s, and some Rembrandts, some Blicks, some more Blick. So we're ready to get started. We have our original photograph for reference. We have our original color study for reference. And we have our board leaning forward. Well, it looks like I'm gonna have to put something back behind it to secure it. So, but we want our board leaning forward from the top so that the dust falls off our painting and not onto our painting. So let's get started. Blend in our base coat because we have to have our bottom layer. Okay, we need different glasses so we can see. Okay, so well, of course I'm finding places where I didn't quite cover up all the white because I had on the wrong glasses. So let's go back and touch this up a bit. Sometimes there's a tendency to rush through this as opposed to taking your time, and so I don't want to do that. Don't give in to that desire to go fast. Take your time with all the different steps. I guess the trick is to enjoy every single step and every single part of your painting. One of the things that I'm doing is pushing out just past where I want the color to be, so that when I come in with the next color, I can have an even flow. I don't want to worry about there being little gaps of white or the colors not meeting up. So just as I pushed in with the blue into the space, now I'm pushing out with the color up to the edge of the bearing. The next thing we're going to do is add all of the edges, the raised section of the bearings. And we don't want to worry about any white showing through, so we can feel free and make smooth, even motions when we bring in the next color. So let's do the next step, which is building up the underlayers of the bearings. So underneath all of these bearings that we see on top, there's a whole tray of bearings underneath. We can't just make them any shape or any size. They're still 6 inches at the pivot points. So if this is the edge here, it's going to come to here, and there's going to be a piece of it here.
What, those bearings at the top look real.
Yeah.
The reflections, the light shines, everything.
Before we get going, let's take a few minutes to talk about where we are and our approach for the rest of the painting. We're going to do it layer by layer by layer as it builds up to the items that are on the very top of this jumble of bearings. So for example, you can see here where I've started. This bearing lays underneath the screw head, which lays underneath this, but we cannot finish this because we need to finish this nut that's in here. This nut needs to be done before we do this bearing, and this bearing cannot be done until this one, cannot be done until this one. This is our initial path, and we have to do this across the whole painting. What's on the very bottom, what's the next thing that lays on top of it, and the next item that lays on top of that. Boy, I don't know what I'm going to do when I lose this one piece of chalk. I love this piece, and it's almost gone. Okay, I've got to find the right gray. I keep wanting a gray in between these two. There's a huge gap there. So we've arrived at Blix and we need to go in and get the medium grays. We're going to have to stop. Look at this. I cannot work with all of this loose paper, and we can see it's all come undone here. As much as we don't want to stop in the middle of doing a painting, this needs to be pulled back together. And we're ready to go back to work. Woohoo! Now we are down to the last few spaces here and this bearing right down here to bring everything kind of up to an even keel. This screw, you can see, looks like it's broken underneath this one, and it's too high. So here we are at this stage of the painting where we definitely need to look at the painting as a whole, decide what areas or what individual things need to be fixed. We need to add in the three-dimensionality that we've achieved here with this shadow on the inner side of the bearing. This needs to be apparent in all the bearings, and it's not. Right now, these screws look like they're floating in space. They need the shadow and the reflected light so that they are on the tray with the bearings. Yeah, it's done. Now I just have to clean up the edges and spray it. I've been trying to get my bearing painting sprayed for days, but the humidity here in Florida has been so high, and we've had rain almost every day. But we have a moment with no rain. The humidity's still a little high. I've cleared off the table. We'll get ourselves set up out here and just spray and hope for the best. Finally getting this thing outside. So we're going to put some rocks around because the wind could come up at any moment and blow this around. Alrighty, we're going to use the final fixative. We're done. There are going to be no more changes, and we need to do multiple layers of a fine mist. We're going to let this dry, and in a few minutes we'll give it another coat. So when this started out, I thought this was going to be a simple, quick painting, and it kind of turned out to be anything but that. Not that it wasn't fun, it was, but it was certainly more than I expected. And having to reach back in my mind and think about geometry and ellipses and how all of the bearings fell in different ellipses on the paper, and then having to think through all the math to figure out the ratios, both to enlarge the bearings and in the component parts of each bearing. All of that was a little bit challenging. Fun, but challenging. We also figured out if it was going to work to put the clear gesso over a drawing. that I'd never done before, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I was absolutely pleasantly, more than pleasantly surprised that it worked out great, and we could just move forward with the painting, have the texture I wanted to have, to apply the pastels. All of that worked great. Finally, towards the end of the painting, we got to really start playing with textures and light and creating weight. And all of that came with building up all of the layers underneath and walking through that whole process to give this feel of a whole pile of bearings, not just some things sitting on top of the paper. And of course we did achieve some of that by using how the light fell and creating shadows, so it placed the bearings and all the different objects in the tray itself. And it ended up being fun in the end. It was fine, but it was not what I expected. I thought it was going to be this simple, quick painting. These are just easy, simple subjects. Well, when you start thinking about it and you want to give a certain feel, then you have to take the time to work it out. I had a great time, and I've had a great time sharing this with you. I hope you guys enjoyed walking through this painting with me. Please leave a like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And leave a comment if you want. And there are links to the products that we used in this video in the description below. And until next time, so long from Why Paint Pastel, and I'll see you soon.